clicked on this video, chances are you're miserable at work. And maybe you're thinking of resigning as a measure to stop that misery. We're not going to tell you to find the silver lining or change your perspective because that's not helpful when you are genuinely suffering.
It isn't. But what we do want you to know is that your misery isn't destiny, it's data.
Absolutely. So that knot in your stomach on a Sunday night, the dread you feel going back to the office, the discomfort with your situation, it's not that you are weak. It's simply data. It's your body, it's your mind telling you that something needs to change.
And here's where most people get it wrong. They think that misery means you need to quit immediately. And let's be honest, sometimes it does. But often that misery is actually pointing you toward a much more strategic solution than just running for the exit.
So before you hand in that resignation letter, we are going to ask you 3 critical questions that might just reframe the entire situation for you, because they're not just any questions. They will help you change how you think about the entire situation and hopefully make the right move.
Hopefully, this will decode what your misery is actually telling you, because the goal isn't to escape your feelings, it's to let them guide you to the right next move. So we're going to share 3 questions that will show you exactly how to do that.
100%. But before we do that, and we always do this, right? We want to first demystify some of the ideas that might help you think about when you want to resign or being miserable in a job differently. So welcome to 40 After 40, 40 lessons we've learned after turning 40. So here's the first note that's important for you to make. Your brain is wired for fight or flight. If you're stressed at work, your brain treats it like physical danger, a literal lion going to jump out of the bush and end you. So we default to get me out of here instead of how do I solve this?
Exactly. Because your brain isn't making that distinction between this is real, terrible danger and this is just stress at work. That's why it feels as bad as it does. But then the other thing we need to remember, because I think what we're doing here is trying to work through the reasons why it's difficult to make this decision. One is the fight or flight. The second is the comfort zone trap, because we are wired also, just as we're wired to fight or flight, we're wired to avoid discomfort naturally. That's what we want to do. Even if that discomfort is causing us to grow, we don't want it. So we often mistake temporary difficulty for permanent misalignment. But sometimes the discomfort is actually where we're supposed to be growing. Yet we live in a culture that says, if it's hard, you're in the wrong place. But read anybody's autobiography. Read anyone's story. You're going to know that it's actually those times of hard things, of difficult things, that often brought them the greatest leaps forward in life. So you have to consider, what if I'm in the right place just at the wrong time in my development?
I love that, because there's also this grass is greener illusion that, oh my goodness, look at that model. If only I was a model. If only my life consisted of just wearing clothes and walking on a stage and I was paid millions of dollars. What you don't see is the brutal diet regime, the late night flights, the repetition of that runway walk 100 times where you feel like your entire body is falling to pieces. We don't see the 2 a.m. stress crying in another person's dream job. So we think, mostly mistakenly, that if we switch jobs, it will save our pain. So you want to switch from a place of strength, not a place of weakness. The other thing is we expect instant things. So there's this, we want a career, but a career takes time. We think, that if we quit the job, we are quitting and it's going to solve our problems immediately. And yet sometimes you need to be used to a little bit of pain so that you can actually push through to some really, really great results. Slow cooking is a lot healthier than microwaving your food.
But we all want, slow cooker careers. We just want them in a microwave period of time. And I think that's understandable looking at the culture that we live in. Everything else is quick. Everything else is fast. And when you see these YouTube billionaires who are only 17 and even on Instagram, it looks like everyone is succeeding faster and better. It's easy to think you're stuck. But the truth is, and this truth has never changed, is that good things take time. But the other thing to remember is that a season is not the same as a destination. Some of the anxiety you may be feeling might be coming from this thought that this is the way it's always going to be. I'm always going to be stuck in this place. But the truth is, a season is not a destination. A bad season doesn't necessarily mean that this is a bad job. Sometimes we're in a learning season that feels uncomfortable and we end up quitting that job when what we should be doing is riding out the season.
I love that because seasons come and go. So if you expect that your life will have summers and winters, you're much more likely to buy a jacket for winter and to then enjoy summer when it comes around. And I think that's the point of our conversation is that we really urge you because in my experience, I could have saved myself a lot of heartache and pain if I'd had this information before making my decision. Looking back, I think it was the right decision, but did I make it at the right time and in the right way? That's also a bit debatable. And at times, fear masquerades as wisdom. This idea of if it doesn't serve you, let it go. There's a meaning to if it doesn't serve you. And sometimes it's serving you is it serves you pain, and that pain is good for you. But we think if it doesn't serve me and make me feel good, I should let it go. So I have a love-hate relationship with Instagram quotes because in as much as they can inspire you and lift you out of the doldrums, they can also make you do some really daft things because it's half
They
of
really
the story.
lack context, don't they, most of the
Yes,
time?
they totally lack context. So, before you make a decision from a fight or flight place, we need to slow down. We need to be honest about what's really happening. That's where this powerful three-part framework really, really moves the needle. And I'd love to dive into that right now. But maybe before we just get into that, I want to just say that I'm wary of sounding like if you hit play and you're watching, it's starting to feel like we're telling you not to quit your job. That's not what we are saying at all, right? I think there's a difference between toxic, for example, workplaces and normal work challenges. And this is so interesting because I'm in a situation right now where I'm counseling someone who is in what I would call a normal work-life challenge job, but they are using the term toxic. Our workplace is toxic. It's toxic. I'm like, no, honey, it's human beings being human beings. And at times you have to make that distinction that if I can overcome these challenges, I'm going to grow so much. I'm going to learn how to negotiate. I'm going to learn how to compromise. I'm going to learn how to advocate for myself. These are important life skills that a workplace usually teaches you. So if you just flee at the very first sign of adversity, you rob yourself of a chance to develop. You are arresting your own development.
And I don't want to sound like an old millennial grandmother, but I
Hey, here
think,
it comes.
like
That's exactly what you're about to sound like.
it had to happen at some point. But I think you're right in the sense of, I think social media just takes things to extremes. Now, any workplace conflict is toxic. Anyone who
Yeah.
isn't nice is a narcissist. I think we're just sort of going to the extremes because the language is now so accessible. And we have just jumped to that without acknowledging or even learning that there's a whole raft of things that this could be in between. But because this is the language
Yes.
that's now accessible to us,
Yes.
since that's what's catchy for influencers to use, that's what we end up using. But maybe you know someone like this, a type of person who quits 5 jobs in 2 years, always for the same reason. Someone who
Right.
almost always quits during their hardest season. Um, and then maybe you also know someone who stays on and they stick through when things are hard and they push through until they get their breakthrough. Those are different ways of being. And I think the difference between a legitimate toxic situation and a normal work challenge is perspective. You have to
Yes.
understand the things around your experience. It may feel the same, and that's the thing we don't always discuss. A toxic work situation may feel the same
As
as
a difficult
a
work
difficult work situation. The
situation.
feelings may be the same. But are they the same thing?
No.
No. And your feelings will not tell you that. What will tell you that is an honest assessment of context with some perspective, which hopefully is what we're going to get to do here. So I think if we get to the 3-part framework in terms of what are the 3 things you need to think about, the 3 pillars you need to hang your perspective building on in when you're trying to figure out, is this a situation I need to leave or is this a growth situation I need to stick out? And I think the first question
Yes.
is emotional. Even though I just said they may feel the same, that's important data. And you need to ask yourself, what is my misery trying to tell me? This is where your emotions can be useful. Don't dismiss your feelings, but you do need to get specific about them. And do you have some questions that you found helpful when you were trying to figure out what are my emotions trying to tell me in this situation?
I love that question. And there's very key questions that are helpful. The first is this exhaustion or genuine misalignment? Are you genuinely misaligned? Let me give a very, very critical example. You work in a place and your manager makes jokes that you're not comfortable with, either faith based jokes, sexual jokes, racist jokes, whatever. You approach your manager and you say, I don't like it when you say something like that. It just makes me feel this way. Maybe you don't notice it. The manager says, okay, and continues to do it. That is toxic. Now, we're getting into toxic because deliberately doing it. But you've tried something, you've spoken up, you've defended yourself, and the situation changes. He changes his behavior. What have you learned? You've learned how to be assertive, how to stand up for yourself. Maybe you Googled a few things before you went in and someone taught you how to, stand up for yourself. Why am I using that example and saying, is it exhaustion or genuine misalignment? It's a lot harder to differentiate between exhaustion and misalignment. That example I gave is a lot simpler. You tried something, it resolved itself, but you had to speak up. If you didn't speak up, you would have walked away saying it's a toxic workplace. I can't, and I've seen that a lot of times, that people walk away without even trying. That is, again, you're not going to be able to figure out whether it's one or the other. So when it comes to the emotional, how you feel, are you exhausted in your spirit or is it just a misalignment? Are you feeling trapped or is it just overwhelmed? If you remove some of the things on your to-do list, will you feel a little bit better? Or are you actually feeling suffocated and trapped because you are doing the wrong work? Work is not a problem. When you're doing something you love, you can do it at all hours of the night and still feel like you're being pulled towards it rather than you having to push yourself. So that's, trapped versus overwhelmed. And those specific emotions that come up when you think about Monday morning are important to pay attention to. Because if you start off on the wrong foot, the rest of your day is going to go downhill. Then, when did these feelings start? Was there a trigger event that started all these feelings? Sometimes I mentor people and they started hating their job when a particular boss arrived, when a particular project was given to them that involved a particular customer or client. So it's actually not the job you hate, it's that one specific circumstance. Then you have to ask yourself, can I learn from dealing with a difficult client? What can I learn from dealing with difficult? And if I can manage a difficult client, is that actually my next growth level? Is that actually what will prepare me to be manager, to be director, to be owner? Because believe you me, the people at the top deal with the worst issues. Now, if you're running away from a bad client, do you really think you're going to be account director at some point? You're not. Are you angry at the situation or are you disappointed in yourself? So the goal is to distinguish between the temporary things that can be addressed. Note the manager who's speaking to you disrespectfully, you can address that. And fundamental misalignment, where the manager refuses to correct their behavior and is continuously enabled by the higher ups and it continues to challenge your value system, something that will stress you out over time. So that's what I love about this emotional aspect, because emotions are data, but we don't pay attention. Either dismiss them or we overindulge them. Both are wrong. So you've
Mm,
got people who
mm,
wallow and in my emotions and and it's too much. And then you've got
mm.
people who pretend they don't have emotions and put them under the carpet and ignore them. And that's how you end up in the ER and the doctor can't find anything wrong with you because you are super stressed. So you need to allow the emotions to be data and to point you to what specifically needs to shift.
Yeah, no, that's great insight. And I think that really summarizes the first point, the first question you have to ask yourself. What are my emotions telling me? The
Yeah.
second question is about the practicals. What does wisdom look like in your actual situation? Because even if your emotions are saying, this is awful, I can't do another day of this. But practically speaking, if you leave tomorrow, you've got no savings in your bank account and you'll be
Yeah.
destitute and on the street, you have nowhere else to go. Well, you have to be honest about the real world factors that affect your decision. And you've got to ask yourself questions if you're considering leaving your job, like, what's my financial runway if I leave today? Do I have dependents counting on my income? What's the job market like in my field right now? Would I be able to get another job quickly? And is it possible that I can address the core issues I'm experiencing without leaving? What if I move to a different department or a different team? Can I impose some boundaries with whoever or whatever is stressing me? Can I say I'm not going to work weekends because that's the particular thing that really gets my goat with this job? You've got to think about those questions. Also, if you're thinking about leaving, think about the practical side of what leaving would cost you. What are you
Yes.
losing if you leave? Is there a health plan? Are there health benefits you're losing? Is it relationships? Is it reputation? And also, do you just have a clear plan for what's next? Or are you just escaping? And this sort of balances out, begins to balance out the emotional, which is very much about the data that's coming from your feelings. And then you need to balance it out with the data that's coming from your environment.
Emotions
So,
and environment, yeah.
and those need to be aligned if you're going to make the right decision. So, if the data that's coming from both is aligning, for instance, I just don't feel fulfilled, I feel like I've hit a ceiling, I feel miserable when I walk into work, I am unmotivated, and the data that in your environment is telling you people doing this job in other companies are earning much more. There is a demand for people with my skills. I made some contacts who look like, there might be something going on there. I have savings in my bank account. I'd be fine for 6 months. Then the environmental data is matching what you're feeling and saying, okay, there might be
There are
something
options,
here.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful way that summarizes number two, which is the practical data. So we've talked about the emotional, the practical. I think this one is my biggest one because you've seen people leave with no options, no job. Job market is bad. It happens as well. And I think it's because of this third one, the spiritual. How is God leading you in this season? There are times I've made leaps in my life and I had no branches, but I felt in my spirit, no, this is not God's heart for me in this particular situation. So are you stewarding God's gifts, times, and resources well? Is staying an act of faith or an act of fear? Is leaving an act of courage or an act of running away? If you can be still and pray about the situation, you will sense some of these answers because you are giving time and, most importantly, space in your heart and in your mind for God. He needs that time. He needs that space to actually talk to you. And I'm saying this from experience. Every time I've been distracted, I don't hear God's voice. And distraction is many things. It's your problems, it's your fears, it's the people around you, it's Netflix, it's books that you think books have the answer, and yet actually it's a spiritual answer. So I would love for us to learn to align our decisions with God's heart, His timing, because for me this is the biggest one. It trumps emotions, it trumps even circumstance. Because I think those are all really great, but for me this is like the bedrock. It's like the foundation of it. So the framework works really well together when all three align. Clear decision. Emotional, I feel called elsewhere. Practical, I have a solid plan, I have runway. Spiritual, God is opening doors and I sense His leading. Time to make a move. Mixed signals, investigate further. And then emotionally, I could deal. Practically, I can't afford to leave. Spiritually, God is telling me I need to still stay here and steward. There are people here who I need to preach to or whatever it is, right? Then you stay. And I think that framework is one you need to consistently investigate. It's not a one and done because you're not a tree. You're not just planted there and you can't move. So I believe that this is a powerful framework that prevents an impulsive decision, but also prevents you from being stuck in indecision. Because indecision is also a decision. It's a decision to not be brave. It's a decision to let your circumstances just dictate your future and so on and so forth. And I think that is just such an amazing way to view the problem. And if you're listening and you're struggling with that decision, we pray for you, we pray with you, but we hope that you use this because it's hard earned experience. And like I say, I'm sounding like a broken record. If I had had this when I needed to make this decision, I would have had so much more peace and just less anxiety even as I made the decision.
Absolutely, because the how and the why is always more significant than the what. Whether you decide to stay or leave, the fact that you've gone through this process, the fact that you've really sat down and gone through what your feelings are, what the situation says, what God says, you will have more peace. Even if it's to go back into a workplace that is difficult, you will have more peace
Yes.
knowing I'm in a storm, but Jesus is in the boat. It's going to be okay. We're going to ride out the storm. It won't be forever. Okay.
Yeah.
So I really, yeah, we really do feel you if this is where you are. We've been there. We know what it feels like. But do spend some time asking these questions. And we pray that God will give you the clarity that you need for this time and this point of your journey.
Thank you for watching. We hope to catch you next time on Peace and Purpose. We wish you peace and I hope you find purpose in your next steps because this is a big decision. For myself, Shanice, and Nancy, we'll catch you next time right here on 40 After 40. Bye.
Bye for now.